There's a feeling that's surprisingly difficult to name. Nothing is obviously wrong. On paper, your life works, the career, the relationship, the routine. And yet sometimes, usually when everything goes quiet, you get the uncomfortable feeling that you're living somebody else's life. Not literally, just a life assembled from decisions that all made sense at the time. And somewhere underneath it is a question you don't particularly want to answer. Is this actually me? By the end of this, you'll have a name for that question. And you'll know why the thing you've been circling your whole life has a center. You may have already met it in the margins of a meeting. The circles you draw in your notes without knowing why. We're coming back to those circles. Jung knew the feeling, except his didn't stay a feeling. At 38, after the break with Freud, images began arriving faster than he could explain them. Floods, blood, voices, people who weren't there. At times, he had to repeat his own name and address, and his profession, just to remind himself which world he was standing in. And somewhere inside all of that, Jung found a shape, a circle, which is strange, because you may have been drawing the same shape during meetings for years. So, before we go any further, you should know what that circle is, and what's been sitting at its center the whole time. Jung noticed something strange about the mandala. It appears on its own, in dreams, in drawings, in states of conflict and disorientation. Children whose parents are divorcing. Adults face down in the problem of opposites. Jung himself started drawing one every morning in 1918, posted at Chateau d'Aux during the First World War, commandant of a camp of British internees. My mandalas were cryptograms concerning the state of the self, he wrote, presented to me anew each day. In them, I saw the self, my whole being, actively at work. He guarded them like precious pearls. That's what you're doing in the margins. You don't know it yet. You're taking your own psychic temperature. The psyche's way of drawing a diagram of itself. No training required, just a pen and a meeting you're not really in. Jung said the mandala's basic motif is the premonition of a center of personality, a kind of central point within the psyche, by which everything is arranged and which is itself a source of energy. The energy of the central point is manifested in the almost irresistible compulsion and urge to become what one is. The urge to become what one is. Hold on to that. It's the whole episode in one sentence. Now the disorienting part. The self is not the self. When you say I, when you make decisions, when you look in the mirror, the I doing all of that is what Jung called the ego. Think of the ego as the middle manager of your psyche, competent, busy, convinced he's running the company. Jung was precise about it. The ego is only the center of my field of consciousness, merely one complex among other complexes. The self is the totality, conscious and unconscious together. For Jung, the self was the organizing principle of the whole psyche. The ego is a flashlight. It illuminates a small circle in an enormous dark room. The self is the room. Last episode, the bed was rooted in a living tree. Here's the map we were drawing. The leaf is the ego. The branch is your personal unconscious. The self is the tree, the whole thing, roots and all. The ego thinks it's in charge. It writes the plan. Career, partner, house, recognition, done. The unconscious has the irritating habit of not reading the plan. A dream keeps returning. A resentment won't go away. The same relationship pattern repeats with a different face. Something you thought you'd settled 10 years ago turns up again on Tuesday. The ego is not going to like this episode. Jung's warning, often put like this: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. How does the self speak? Not in words. It doesn't send emails. It doesn't call meetings. The owner never calls meetings. First language, dreams. The greater the distance between who you're living as and who you actually are, the louder the self has to shout. Second, synchronicity. The meaningful coincidence that clusters at thresholds. The book that falls open to your exact dilemma. Third, symptoms. Anxiety without cause. Depression that descends despite everything being fine. Now, and this matters, not all suffering is psychological. But Jung believed, and psychosomatic research supports, that some of it is the unconscious reacting to a conscious life the deeper self can't tolerate. Fourth, the numinous. The moments that stop you in your tracks. The sudden, overwhelming sense that you're part of something vast, something that knows you better than you know yourself, which is a polite way of saying something inside you is older, bigger, and considerably more patient than you are, and it has an agenda. That agenda is individuation. For Jung, individuation wasn't something you completed. It was something the psyche kept pulling towards throughout life, and resisting it could carry a cost. Now, the shape of it, the shore disappears first, then the sun. Odysseus sails beyond the familiar world until even the landscape seems to run out. He isn't traveling towards another kingdom. He's going somewhere the living aren't supposed to go, to ask the dead how to get home. Jung recognized the pattern. Sometimes the way home goes down first. Other cultures gave the descent different names. Inanna's descent, the Egyptian Duat, Jonah in the belly of the whale, 3 days in the tomb. Civilizations kept telling versions of it because it isn't just a story, it's a pattern, the blueprint for what happens to the psyche when it's called to die to what it was and be reborn as what it's meant to become. And Jung didn't just theorize about it, he survived one. In 1913, after the break with Freud, the collapse of a father-figure dynamic that had structured his entire identity, he did something most psychologists would call reckless. He went inward. He began a practice he'd later call active imagination, deliberately engaging the unconscious while awake, sitting in his study, quieting the rational mind, letting the images rise. What came up nearly overwhelmed him. A wise old man he called Philemon, a dark feminine figure he called Salome, a serpent, a dwarf. Voices, visions of floods, rivers of blood, Europe destroyed, visions that preceded the outbreak of the First World War by months. Those were the days he had to repeat his own name and address, just to hold on to which world he was standing in. In his own account, a voice said, "If you do not understand the dream, you must shoot yourself." And in a drawer of his night table lay a loaded revolver. We cannot know exactly what that period felt like, but we know what he did with it. He recorded everything, in journals, in paintings, in the elaborate calligraphic manuscript that would become the Red Book, published 50 years after his death. And he said that period was the most important of his life. Everything he accomplished afterward was merely the elaboration of what erupted from the unconscious during those years. He also said, with characteristic honesty, he wouldn't wish the experience on anyone, and at the heart of it, the dream that changed everything. 1927, Liverpool. Everything is gray, the buildings, the rain, the faces beside him. They climb from the harbor to a broad square, dimly lit, where many streets converge. In the center, a round pool. In the middle of the pool, a small island. Everything around it is obscured by rain, fog, smoke. And then, impossible in all that darkness, sunlight. Not everywhere. One island, one tree, a magnolia in a shower of reddish blossoms. It was as though the tree stood in the sunlight and were at the same time the source of light. His companions keep walking. They comment on the abominable weather. They don't see it. Jung does. The center is the goal, he wrote, and everything is directed toward that center. Through this dream, I understood that the self is the principle and archetype of orientation and meaning. Therein lies its healing function. Liverpool is the pool of life. The liver, according to an old view, is the seat of life, that which makes to live. And that image, that one image, was why he was able to live at all. The map of the whole psyche, the thing he'd been circling for years, arrived as a circle, a pool, an island, a tree, a center. The psyche drew itself a picture, and the picture said, "Keep going. What's on the other side? Not what you'd expect. Wholeness, not perfection, not the end of suffering." People who've done this work describe it strangely. You emerge as the person you always were, but couldn't be. Not the happiest, not the most successful, the most real. The ego doesn't die. It takes its proper job, the conscious instrument through which the self expresses itself in the world. The middle manager finally reads the job description. And that's why individuation isn't linear, it's a spiral. So, the practice. Tomorrow morning, before the phone gets you, draw a circle. Put a point in the center, 15 minutes, one pen. No masterpiece, no interpretation while you're doing it. If you can't draw, good. That's the point. Draw whatever belongs inside the circle that morning, then stop. Don't ask whether it's good. Ask something more interesting. Why did I draw that? And don't expect fireworks. The unlived life accumulates interest. The unconscious material grows. Each time the call returns, it demands more, because more has been deferred. And the usual note. This is philosophy, not therapy. If the voices in your head are hurting you, if you're struggling, get real help, please. This is reflection, not treatment. The thread was always a circle. The labyrinth was always a circle. You've met the shadow, the hero, the mask, the anima, the elder, the animus. Every one of them was a piece of it, all pointing at one center. The urge to become what one is. That's not self-improvement. It's not a glow-up. It's the psyche trying to complete its own picture. Channel framing. Jungians put it like this: the shadow isn't your enemy. It's where the gold went. Not because the darkness is good, because you are more than the clean version you show the world. This is where Season 2 ends. Shadow, hero, persona, anima, elder, animus, self. The circle is complete. But Jung leaves us with another problem. What if meaning isn't something waiting inside you to be found? What if it has to be built? For tonight, draw the circle, 15 minutes. See what shows up in the center. That ache you've been carrying? Jung would tell you not to silence it too quickly. It may be something deeper, knocking. You've been circling it your whole life. The center was always the goal, and the center was you. You've been watching Mindscape Philosophy, and that's the end of Season 2, the Jungian Mythology series. From the shadow to the self, the circle is complete. Next series, the absurd. If meaning has to be built rather than found, what do you build it on? Absurdism, coming soon.